Hutia te rito o te harakeke, kei hia te kōmako e kō. Ki mai ki au, hea te mea nui o te ao, māku e ki atu. He tangata, he tangata, he tangata. Tihei mauri ora. Rātou mā kua wheturangitia haere oki oki. Te au o te moi kia rātou, te ao o te rā kia tātou. Kei aku nui, kei aku rahi, tēnā koutou. Te arawa māngai nui e whakamaru nei a tātou, tēnei te mihi. Kia tātou kua tai mai ki te wānanga i tēnei kaupapa nui. Nō reira, tēnā tātou katoa. Morena. I cannot get up here and not acknowledge that I had my Ngāpuhi uncle Hone Sadler sitting behind me. I know my tokero, Te Arawa e Ngāpuhi whānau are here. My tai rāwhiti, Porou, Ngāti Porou whānau are here. My Waikato, Ngāti Tahinga whānau. Tēnei au e tū ana, kei muia koutou, kia ora tātou katoa. I was reminded by Wayne reminiscing on our beautiful matatini in the recent weeks, where I believe, and it was quite interesting that Uncle Hone was sitting at my back, because I believe we had a new whakatauki out of that matatini, which is not just Ngāpuhi Nui Tonu, but Ngāpuhi Peacemakers Tonu. I have to say I clung to that whakatauki this morning because whānau, I just say very quickly, after the week I've had, it's quite good to be sitting in a room full of hundreds of Māori. Kei te tū tonu kaha ahau. Kia ora. There is no point in me being a minister or a politician if I compromise on my te ao Māori voice. Kia ora tātou katoa. I want to acknowledge the other ministers were supposed to be doing the first slots before me. I'm proud and pleased that I am able to be here, ka nohi, to be able to kōrero with you this morning and acknowledge Ministers Woods and Jackson, my friends Megan and Willie, in being able to hopefully join us later and maybe up on the camera. Tukua mai he kapunga one kia hau heitangi māku. Send me a handful of soil so that I may weep over it. As Māori, we know our connection to our whenua provides us with a source of identity and whakapapa, spiritual nourishment and emotional healing. And that is what was referred to earlier today in the kōrero and the whakaaro of Moana Jackson. It's not just about a house. For us, Te Whenua takes the tears that we may shed and provides healing in times of spiritual and emotional turmoil. Being houseless is to be in that turmoil. And it was at one of the previous Maihi Whare Wānanga actually that I was strongly reminded about the difference for tangata whenua, for Māori, between being homeless and being houseless. Because, as many have said, we are not homeless. Aotearoa is and will always be our home. But we have been made landless and houseless. And that is what needs to change. Our speakers this morning and Mikey just now have also talked about us knowing what homelessness looks like. Too many of us knowing that, seeing that, feeling that, and having experienced that far too well. I was remembering, as I was sitting here listening to Wayne this morning, about absolutely that we have come here through political decisions and through colonisation. And it is exactly that, political decisions, decolonisation and re-indigenisation, that will pull us through that. I was listening to that fantastic definition of homelessness that was put up on the slides here that have come from us about respect, integrity, mana and tapu. And I was remembering how I felt when, before I became a politician, as a then single mama with Māori kids running everywhere, as we were lining up with many, maybe 50 plus people to look at one rental to try and get into a rental home, and how hard that was in Manurewa in South Auckland. And after looking at every rental and my tamariki, one of the things that still breaks my heart to this day is, as a young Māori and single mama, I was never at the front of anyone's list to become a tenant in their home. And I remember we looked at one of the whare, and it wasn't a whare that probably anyone else wanted. It was old, it was drafty, it was full of mould, it was cold. And I remember my tamariki seeing how bad shape it was. And I remember my youngest saying to me, "Maybe no one wants this one, Mama, and maybe they'll give us this one." And I remember thinking, Māori deserve the best. We deserve nothing less than the best. And fancy having our tamariki being inherently told and feeling that they are going to be at the back of the line because of who we are. And all of you here are trying to change that. And that's what I'm here to acknowledge this morning. I was talking to Haihaitu, who was giving me a rundown on some of the wairua and the vibe from your amazing day yesterday that I've been hearing about from several people. That this opportunity to come together is about our strength base, is about what we have to offer as te iwi Māori into the solutions, not just for Māori, but for Aotearoa. And I've been very, very clear. We allow Māori to lead, we give the resources, the power, and get out of the way. This will actually resolve our entire housing crisis. This is actually the opportunity that I know Māori have for Aotearoa and for the world. That this opportunity to come together is learning from each other. The networks and the collaboration made, people telling their stories and saying, this is how we did this here, and others being, oh, okay, well, this is how we did this here, and pulling that mātauranga together. And that those very new connections and relationships that people, I heard Wayne talking about, I think it was over 800 or 900 registrations. Haihaitu was talking about having to cut it off. Haihaitu was talking about everyone wanting to show their presentations and there not being enough space. This is fantastic. This is the positivity and the energy, and it's because our people know it is our people who need this urgently, beautifully, and inspiringly. And so that sense of urgency and energy to get in there and muck in and do it, that's what the vibe is that I'm picking up from, and again this morning. I wanted to pick up on the cyclones and the floods and how they have impacted on our iwi and our Māori rohe around the country. And at this point, I wanted to be really clear that I do not do this mahi without my prevention violence hat on at all times, especially in the area of housing. Wayne has already mentioned the connected issues. Housing is one of the biggest prevention violence mahi that we can do. And I'm really clear about the role that I have to play in both of these areas. I've also first off wanted to be clear about what has been pointed out in no uncertain terms. I need this as a minister for my prevention violence mahi. I need this as a minister for my homelessness mahi. The way that the government agencies and departments have been commissioning and working with communities as a whole, but especially Māori organisations and providers, has to be forever a higher trust, authentic partnership, properly funded, sustainable funded, relationship-based way of working. And we're already seeing the good results of that exact way of working. We saw a little bit of that happen through COVID when it first came up, where suddenly a heck of a lot more trust had to be given over to our communities to lead this work, who knew where the whānau were, who knew what was needed, and who were connected to other organisations to work together to do this mahi. But I've also been hearing from the ground that this approach has been wound back a bit as we started going back into the rigid status quo. And that is simply not good enough, and it's a priority for me, especially in my ministerial space, to push deep, hard, strong and long for that relational way of working. It's pretty much summed up the way that we've heard it here time and time again. Devolve the power and the resources out, devolve the authority out, get rid of the bureaucracy, get out of the way. I want to acknowledge places like Papakura Marae, who have been talking to me in an understandably frustrated and angry way about the capacity that it takes from them to be able to just do their mahi with whānau, with the workload that chews up their FTEs just for managing contracts. Sometimes more than one contract to one organisation, several. And that does nobody any good. And this is what my priority is. This is the mandate that I am seeking from everyone and my ministerial colleagues and all of our respective agencies to change as quickly as possible. There is the Social Sector Commissioning Work Programme in the pipeline, but I'm clear we also can't wait for that length of time. We have to start finding those opportunities wherever we possibly can to make the way that we work with organisations actually about the whānau, actually about just helping them and getting them what they need. And this will have generational, beautiful impacts for all of us for many, many years to come. So I did want to be clear about my prioritisation is. Now I'm going to come to the rangatahi mahi. And I think on this is where I wanted to, and she's not going to like this at all, but I think many of you know even more than I do, but I want to acknowledge the importance of having our Māori in good places. And kararaina, one of the issues that is constantly raised with me is about how important it is to have te ao Māori understanding in our agencies, to improve and build the understanding of our agencies to respond to te ao Māori leadership and mātauranga, but also, and Wayne said it first, to minimise the systemic racism that has been embedded in our systems for nearly 200 years. Kararaina, you cannot shy away from the leadership that you show in those places. We also need to see more of it, and your team, and I know Ben Dalton is going to be speaking, I believe, or here as well. So good Māori in all the places, I think, is what we can gain from that. And then our relationships. And then one of the examples I was going to give, and Wayne and Tyrone, I believe you were there as well, last week, early dawn ceremony for He Pā Piringa in Manukau in South Auckland, led by the phenomenal Mahera Maihi, her organisation Rōpū Mā Te Huruhuru, and the advocacy group Manaaki Rangatahi, the first ever kaupapa Māori transitional housing precinct in Aotearoa. Whānau, I just really do want to paki for that. Now, I am regrettable that we need youth transitional housing in the first place. This is a response to a deeply rooted colonial problem of stealing our land. But those are the solutions that are going to pull us through that. I regret that Mahera faced far too many bureaucracy barriers along the way. I am proud that I was able to be a voice for her rangatahi leadership and vision to push it through as much as I possibly could. I know that we need to see far more of that innovation in this space, not just Māori leading these solutions, but rangatahi leading these solutions. And also because, ashamedly, we have an unacceptably high amount of rangatahi who do not have safe homes, who do not have stable homes. This is unacceptable. And it is rangatahi who need to lead us out of that. And it is our government agencies, and I say this to my officials, I say this to Peter Hughes, that have to reduce the barriers to lead that work. We have 200 years of evidence that what we have been doing has not worked. So we have enough evidence to be able to try these things now. I want to be clear and I want to see more of that innovation happening. Mahera has taken an incredible brave step to then allow a template to be able to say, hey whānau, work with us. We've got the mātauranga on how to do this, and at the same time, reduce the barriers across our agencies. In our earlier spaces, with our tamariki, our rangatahi, and of course their whānau, that is where we all know, the earlier the better, that is where we can make some of the most significant impact. I wanted to mention that the intersection of the Homelessness Action Plan, which was launched in February 2020, and then I became a minister at the end of 2020, has to interact with the Maihi framework that Wayne just talked about. What it needs to do and what we need to see in the next steps, because that Homelessness Action Plan is coming to the end of its initial term, is in all of the government work focusing on homelessness, that we have to see the Māori-led solutions coming through. You saw the photo earlier of Hearahiki Māori, the almost $25 million to support a delivery of a tangata whenua-led response to homelessness. And I want to be clear that aroha nui ki te tangata and the Māori leadership in each of our different work program spaces is vital. That our agencies will learn from the unique Māori-led initiatives in those housing work program spaces, and we have to get right in behind the specific Māori-led work. There was a local innovation and partnership fund that also comes under my ministerial work program. We have seen that 9 of the 17 successful applicants in that local innovation and partnership fund were Māori organisations. We're just starting to get better at correcting the injustice of the inequalities of how power and resource has been allocated. We've still got a long way to go. But Wayne alluded to it before, this government has, and I do acknowledge this because we've got to keep it going, has seen the single biggest investment and shift towards Māori-led housing with the resource. And I also do acknowledge that successive governments and the selling off of housing as a public common good has absolutely harshly discriminated and impacted on whānau Māori, and we must all stand up to never see that trend ever again. But we are also moving into the space of not just restoring public and housing for the common good and as a human right, but Māori-led housing. And I do acknowledge, especially here in Rotorua, that Te Ururoa saw that gap back as Māori Development Minister, saw the gap of the Māori-led housing. There had previously been Māori strategies, but with no resourcing, no authority, and no implementation plan. And I do acknowledge Te Ururoa saw that gap and started to pick that through, and then Nanaia coming through and picking up, and of course we have Willie and Penny pushing through with all of us as housing ministers for the distinct and unique ring-fenced resource and authority for Māori housing. We're still not stopping at that. We can't. We're starting to build up, though, the good things that happen, when Māori are able to lead and are empowered to do so. I sort of made a bit of a mishmash of my beautiful speech that was written to me by my fantastic Māori housing team. But I think I've made the majority of the points that I wanted to make in this time. I should also say that as I was reflecting on Matatini, I have to acknowledge whakaue being one of the toa of Matatini. How can I not? I believe, last night, thank you. I always do, Mikey, try to get into a venue because that tāwhiri mātia down in Poneke is kaha as. Last night when Rawiri and I, is that you down there, Rawiri? Am I seeing you? Rawiri, no. Aroha mai. I should have put my glasses on. Hang on. Oh, Carl. But Rawiri is here, Carl. But Rawiri is here, or is going to be talking tomorrow. Rawiri and I were on the same plane coming to Rotorua from Wellington last night. And I think it's a whole lot of the conference people, you were as well. And I thought to Rawiri, we're on the same plane. Is that wise to have us both on the same plane, given the target of white supremacy that we can often be? Is that... I did say that too loud, and some of the conference whānau were like, could you not sort of give us that feeling as we're sitting on the plane next to you? But I wanted to acknowledge our other politicians, and I believe I saw Tama in here this morning, unless, my way of getting out of that hole is all our handsome Māori men look the same. So I may have also, ka pai. But I believe I also saw Tama as well. I think that's the thing is this political system, it's an election year. This Western political system, it's not a Te Ao Māori one. The whanaungatanga and whakapapa connections across Parliament of Māori politicians has always been strong. We need to convince our non-Māori colleagues to work together better, and to stop using our people for political gain and points. The Māori caucus across political parties has always been in a much better headspace for that, because essentially that world and that way of working sets us up to work against each other. That's the way it is designed. Te Ao Māori values are the last vanguard against a very conservative right-wing world that is trying to push in to what we believe in, and we won't let that happen. But I think we can do a lot more in Te Ao Māori politics too, to work together and to really lean on our Te Ao Māori values as the solutions, not just for Aotearoa, but for the world. Nō reira, tēnei taku mihi aroha kia koutou, tēnā koutou, kia ora mai tātou katoa.